How you doing? This is Jim Fisher. Welcome to The Third Way. Not left, not right, America's Third Way, libertarianism. Today I wanted to talk about the $750 billion government stimulus program that Obama wants to propose tomorrow night. And will this work? So there are only three ways you can generate the money for stimulus spending. That is through taxation, through the Fed printing, or through deficit spending. Those are the only three ways to generate the money. If you think we should do it through taxation, what you're saying is government programs like building bridges, parks, and roads somehow stimulates the economy better than people spending money on cars, radios, and TVs, and whatever else, food and things people buy. Because when you tax to do stimulus spending, you're removing money from people to raise the level of government spending. That's insanity if you think that somehow can stimulate the economy. It can't. In fact, it's actually much worse. Although for this, Obama wants to actually decrease tax rates, so he wants to fund this through mostly deficit spending. He'll do some of it through Fed printing money. When the Fed prints money, that debases or devalues the dollar bill. It inflates our money, which is basically stealing from people with savings. If there's $100 in circulation and you print $100, you now have $200 in circulation. You haven't increased aggregate production at all, so you have twice the money to spend on the same amount of goods, which means everything inflates to twice the cost. Your money becomes worth half as much. So if you had $100,000 in your 401k, you now have $50,000. So when the Fed prints money, they are directly stealing from your savings. Borrowing or deficit spending is basically removing $750 billion from the future economy to spend today. That is, yes, could stimulate slightly today, and it will be more than offset by the additional money that is removed from the future economy. So there is no logical way to think that stimulus spending by the government can boost the economy. It actually can on a temporary basis. For the next 2 years, you could increase the level of employment. But as we learned through World War II, increased employment doesn't always mean a higher standard of living or economic prosperity. So how the hell do we get out of this recession that we're in? There's only one way, and that's to reduce government spending. In 1919, we were in a Great Depression that was just as bad as the 1929 Great Depression. The difference is Coolidge and Harding cut 50% of the federal budget in 1 year. They reduced federal spending by half. Think of what that would mean today. They did it. And that recession lasted 18 months. It had the identical numbers in 1929. They had 15 to 19% unemployment. We were coming out of the Great War. There was massive deficits. Not massive deficits, but a massive debt to pay back from the war. And even though they reduced the top tax rate to 20%, and they cut federal spending by 50%, they still managed to pay that down and at the same time bring us out of a recession in 18 months. 1929, fast forward to 1929, we had the exact same conditions. You had Black Tuesday or Friday or whatever it was. We had 15 to 20% unemployment. The numbers were very similar. The difference was we did the NRA programs, price controls. The government spent massive amounts of money, and that depression didn't last 18 months. That depression lasted 15 years and then some. That depression actually lasted longer than that because we really didn't come out of it till 1946. There's this fallacy that World War II brought us out of the Great Depression. And if you go by that logic, then it kind of sounds like government spending can take you out of a depression, because what is a war but government spending on really economically useless things, missiles and planes and tanks and things that have no aggregate demand for them, can somehow take us out of a recession. Ask your grandparents that lived through the war, if that was a depression period or not, while they were rationing flour and other foods, and you literally could not get your hands on produced goods. That was still a recession. The difference is we had full employment. So people say we were out of the recession. We were not. The recession lasted right through the war. So the war and government spending does not take you out of a depression. Because we had full employment, people say we do. But by that logic, Obama could just pay half of the unemployed to dig a ditch and pay the other half to fill it back in, and voila, we're all set. The depression's over. You would obviously, yeah, Jim, that's very illogical. We can't just, there's no production by paying half the people to dig a ditch and half the people to fill it in. That's a waste of resources, as is war spending. It's the identical thing. On economic terms, war spending or military spending is identical to digging a ditch and filling it back in. You're paying people to produce things that there is no aggregate demand for. Yes, you have full employment, but you're not increasing the amount of produced goods. You're not increasing the amount of food we can have, the amount of housing, the amount of things that people actually want do not get increased. So the evidence is there. We've tried both techniques. We've tried spending over and over and over again. We've tried cutting spending a couple of times, and those times it worked. It got us out of the recession. Japan has tried spending their way out of a depression. They're now in the middle of what could be equivalent to our Great Depression. They're now at almost 2.5 GDP national debt. They will not get out of that without a total collapse of their monetary system. We're heading in the same direction. So we can keep going down that road and try spending another $750 billion. We did it 2 years ago. They said it would bring our unemployment down below 8%. Our unemployment went up around 10%. So, and then their answer is, oh, we just didn't realize how bad the economy really was. Thank God we spent that $700 billion, or unemployment would have really been 12%. So they give you a prediction. The actual results are the opposite of the prediction, and then they tell you, oh, thank God we did this, or it would have been even worse. That's their logic for success. We can't let them do this. Anything you can do, call your senators, your congressmen, let them know they cannot vote for this. Jim Fisher signing off for the Third Way, not left, not right, America's Third Way, libertarianism.